Okay, well, good afternoon. I think we'll get started. Oh my gosh, most of you guys know me, so I don't know how much of an introduction I really need to do, but maybe there's some things you don't know about me. I grew up in southwest Minnesota, and from a young age, you could honestly find me playing in the dirt, helping with my grandmother's big, huge vegetable garden on the farm, or just volunteering for various conservation efforts around our county. I grew up just houses down from our local Redwood County Soil and Water Conservation District manager, where Marilyn really took me under her wing. She was a great mentor and cheerleader as I pursued my career in conservation. I actually started working for her at our local conservation district at the age of 17, and by the age of 19, I had gained the technical skills to delineate wetlands, survey waterways, and other conservation practices that landed on the ground, and I had completed several hundred CRP compliance checks for weeds and establishment success. That really honed in my career. I went on to graduate from South Dakota State in 2005 with a degree in range management, and then I moved west to Wyoming, planting me right here in front of you today. Over the years, I've learned that conservation districts have a unique opportunity to build a bridge between various stakeholders for the betterment of our landscapes. Over the next 60 minutes, you will get a taste of how Sublette County Conservation District has driven a collaborative process to get conservation on the ground, resulting in the future restoration of a degraded watershed. The road to restoration is often long, complicated, and hard to navigate. Today we are going to talk about a landscape that has seen intensive use at varying scales for over 100 years, and to be quite honest, it looks like it. One of the first lessons I learned in working in Sublette County is that someone has to prioritize natural resources. So first today we're going to get the backstory from our County Commissioner, Joel Bausman. We're going to work through and obtain an understanding of the complexities of our landscape, and then I'll share about various collaborative projects that our district has been a part of to help see this restoration of a landscape that totals just over 200,000 acres. Not all of our collaborators could travel to be here in Orlando. I just gave this, and so I'm reading, sorry. So we spent some time creating videos. Actually, most of you are in here, so if you want to talk. So you'll get their perspective and not just mine. Sublette County is approximately 3.2 million acres, home to approximately 10,000 residents and thousands of visitors each year. We are nestled in the Intermountain West, surrounded by the Wyoming Range on our western boundary, the Gros Ventres on our northern boundary, and the Wind River Range to our east. Our county is incredibly diverse, not only in land ownership, but also both ecologically and interpersonally. These things can make natural resource management just a bit trickier to navigate. The county commissioners recognize that there are three mainstays to our economy, those being industry, recreation and tourism, and agriculture. Approximately 80% of our land base in Sublette County is public lands, of which are also where a majority of these activities take place. Oh my goodness, sorry. That said, the integrity of our natural resources associated with public lands rises to top priority, where the land uses and their management must be sustainably managed for us to preserve our heritage and economic integrity within our county. Recognizing this, the Sublette County Board of Commissioners has prioritized funding our range program at the Sublette County Conservation District. I had the opportunity to interview Joel Bausman, longstanding county commissioner, to ask him a few questions about the inception of our range program, and here's what he had to say. All right, so I'm most interested in the perspective of the commissioners, and what was the need in the county that encouraged you all to fund a range program at the Conservation District?
One of the ways to help preserve and strengthen the agriculture part of our economy, in our county, about 20% of the land base in our county is private land. The rest is either Forest Service, BLM, or state land. for our agriculture ranchers to survive in this county, we have to have viable public lands grazing operations. And in order to maintain our grazing permits and maintain the conservation on the natural resource conservation on public lands, we need to work closely, the permittees, to work closely with the federal agencies to make that happen. Part of working closely with the federal agencies includes the fact that grazing permits need to be renewed every 10 years. And there's a history of the radical environmental communities challenging the BLM lack of data that they have on hand to renew grazing permits. And so the county saw a need to get involved by encouraging our permittees to work closely with in our case, we have a very active conservation district in our community that does work with the federal agencies, and so that was the most logical avenue for us to use to help the permittees address these issues and make sure that when it came time to renew grazing permits, that the federal agencies, either BLM or Forest Service, had the data, the range monitoring data that they needed that would stand up in court and withstand a challenge when the permit renewals were challenged. It also, by having that good working relationship between the permittees, the conservation district, and federal agency range staff, it makes it much easier to address natural resource problems if and when they're identified and develop solutions. And it leads to better resource management. It helps the permittees and the ranching part of our community. It helps them remain viable and helps their, in my opinion, helps their bottom line in maintaining their financial economic viability to remain actively engaged in the ranching business.
Did you have any specific projects in mind that the range program would help to propel to collect that data?
Yes, we did. When we first started the process of major funding of the Sublette County Conservation District, the purpose that we saw the most need for was rangeland monitoring and having the expertise available for the district to actually go out on the ground with the permittees in a joint cooperative monitoring effort along with the federal agency range staff and collect the data.
And how have you seen the Conservation District help bridge that gap between land management agencies, producers, or other interested folks on the ground?
Well, I think the main way they bridge that gap is actually two ways. One is it increases the range resources available to the permittees to get advice and to get help. The other way, by the way our conservation district is managed and the way it works, the permittees recognize that the conservation district is here not as a regulatory agency to tell the permittees what they can and can't do. They're here to help the permittees develop solutions and help them develop monitoring programs, help educate in the process, educate the permittees as to what their options are and what they can do to successfully resolve some of these natural resource issues.
Have you seen Sublette County Conservation District benefit the county and specifically to the North LaBarge area?
Absolutely. It's been a huge benefit to the grazing in the LaBarge area. The LaBarge Common Allotment, for example, had some issues identified with the federal agencies, mainly with BLM in this case, that have been issues for quite a few years. And I think once we got the conservation district funded to where they could become involved in those issues, it really got to the point that we started addressing the actual issues on the ground and making progress. And I think a big return for the permittees in the Labarge area.
Our conservation district does not have a mill levy. So the fact that the county commissioners find value in the sustainable management of our natural resources ensures our continued funding, along with our persistent grant writing. The heart of the range program continues to be the cooperative collection of monitoring data to support permit renewal, just as Joel had mentioned. But as we've developed relationships with federal and state agencies and private landowners, our program has slowly morphed to where other projects have simply landed in our laps, allowing the program to encompass more of a holistic rangeland and watershed health perspective. Understanding this will be pertinent to the rest of our conversation today. So let's zoom into the big piney Labarge landscape, where the Conservation District has played a key role in collaboration for an ultimate purpose of rangeland health and landscape restoration. The area we are digesting today is approximately 260,000 acres. This acreage is complex in many ways, which makes it incredibly unique. First and foremost, this is a landscape that is short on water. This area has 3 perennial streams, which are indicated by the blue lines on this map up here. And also the yellow dots on that same map represent the springs that source our intermittent riparian channels throughout the allotment. The map on the right just kind of shows the different precipitation zones that are also within this project area, starting with 7 inches of precip on the eastern border and then running all the way up on Deadline Ridge to 20 plus inches of precip per year. It's about 15 miles across. And in that time, in that spread, we go from 7,000 feet to 9,000 feet in elevation. In addition to precip, elevation, and landscape hydrology, the area is defined by complex geology that has a lot of salts, such as calcium carbonate and sodium, that can also influence our plant communities and their potential. These pictures, from left to right, show typical plant communities. Starting in the 7-inch precip zone, we have mostly salt scrub plant communities that are very droughty, 7 inches of precip, very little leaching of salts, so that impacts plant community potential. You go up in precip, you start seeing that this white layer is actually where the accumulation of carbonates in our soil starts to show, and wherever this accumulation is, could potentially impact the productivity of your plant community on the surface. You move up in elevation and precip, and this is like our 15 to 19 inch precip zone. You'll see like it's a darker soil, a lot more organic matter, also producing or having the potential to produce greater amounts of vegetation up into our 20 plus conifer and aspen plant communities. So those are the natural features. We're going to take a look at the influences of man on the landscape. So as it relates to multiple use, the map on the left displays surface disturbance related to oil and gas activity within the area. The map on the right shows the different allotments that are in the area, grazing allotments. Not all of those grazing allotments are run by the same permittees, so that adds a little bit more complexity in working with all these different operations and operators. This area is also widely used for recreation, including four-wheeling, hunting, and wildlife viewing. This landscape is a patchwork of state lands in blue, BLM lands in yellow, private lands in white, Forest Service in green. Many of the private lands in the area are also owned by those grazing permittees that graze within those allotments that we just saw on the previous slide. At this point, just having multiple use, multiple ownership, along with the complexities of natural resources, bring a lot of potential collaborators to the table. Throughout a series of our projects and working with a variety of collaborators on a lot of values and interests particular to this landscape have been identified. Items from solitude to supporting the economic staples of Sublette County, to invasive weeds and plant diversity, There are a lot of benefits and values that this particular acreage brings to residents and the visitors of Sublette County. In addition to all of this, we have to navigate federal and state regulations, including some private land laws surrounding trespass and water use. Suffice it to say, this area is complicated. So this is the story about how we got from here to here. In the spring of 2016, the Conservation District had a distressed landowner call us regarding feet of sediment that literally landed in his field as a result of a significant runoff event. This first picture up here is the native rangelands that produced the sediment that landed on his field. Literally went through these culverts, plugged many of them, and then landed here. These are just additional photos of some of the damage, I guess, that had been done, or the sediment that was moved as a result of the same rainfall event. Oh, sorry. The geology in this area is sedimentary and erodes easily. Therefore, this is a landscape that is sensitive to water movement and loss of vegetative cover. We know that sediment didn't just start moving on this landscape in 2016, and history tells us that the integrity of this landscape has been compromised for over hundreds of years. In the 1700s, the United States was in the position of land acquisition. Then, in the 1800s, the U.S. transitioned to the disposition era, where Congress encouraged folks to move west by means of the Homestead Act in 1862. As a result of exploration of the area, squatters homesteaded and oil and gas exploration took place. Where local sources say the first well in Sublette County was actually drilled in the LaBarge area in 1907. Various other acts were established by Congress to address public land management, and in addition, there were large veg management practices that were being applied across the landscape, like 2,4-D of sagebrush to increase herbaceous cover, among other practices. Sensitive geology, plus intensive use, plus changing directives, plus changing personnel is simply a recipe for disaster. All that said, man's influence on the landscape had started long before the issues of 2016. There had been many years of conversations amongst agencies, permittees, and land users, industry, and many more, but actions they agreed to quickly lost traction for one reason or another. After these large erosion events in 2016, I would say that the intent to restore this landscape really amped up. New inventories of vegetation and assessments started to take place across the landscape in 2006. After 2016, larger projects started to get funded, which prioritized a holistic approach to rangeland and watershed health and restoration. So this is our roadmap for the rest of our time together. In order to help you walk through all of the efforts in the area, I had to find a way to categorize them. So we will talk specifically about what we've done or the projects we're participating in to address wildlife habitat, livestock grazing, holistic rangeland health, the LaBarge oil and gas platform, and then also addressing the excessive erosion in the area. So first we will start by addressing the sediment. We really just had to start asking, where is it coming from and why? There are just over 15,000 acres that make up the disturbed lands within this particular area. Hundreds of roads dissect the landscape, just asking water to change its course, and thousands of culverts and contouring that begs water to leave the landscape. As we started to look at the area further, we noticed that sediment was moving everywhere, not just in the alluvial fans where you would expect it. So in order to address the issue, it was determined that we need a thorough inventory.
The reason that the BLM decided to go ahead and do a watershed restoration project in this particular watersheds are because they are all tributary to the Upper Green River, and the federal government must meet its obligation to the treaty with Mexico that we do not increase sediment or salinity into the Colorado River system. The first part of this project was to determine what are the baseline conditions, what are the existing conditions in this particular area, which is about 250 square miles. The BLM entered into a memorandum of agreement with the Sublette County Conservation District to do an inventory of all of the culverts associated with oil and gas roads, well pads, pipelines that are throughout this entire area. Here is an example of one of the culverts that flows through this particular ephemeral channel, and this is the erosion that has occurred just from rainfall events in this area. The inventory took about 2 years. There are more than 2,000 culverts in this study area, and each one is associated with photos above and below the culvert. The second part of this project, we hired Jacola from Montana to do a rapid assessment of the area and come up with possible potential projects, from which we chose about 20. We then had Jacola draw up contract documents, specifications to start work on these particular projects. And this project in Wildcat Canyon, this project and one above it, has been fully funded for 2022.
All right, the BLM had asked the Conservation District to help develop this watershed inventory. Using ArcGIS, we created a geodatabase that could be used on mobile devices where ArcPad was installed. For consistency in data collection, each individual was trained, given a copy of the developed procedures, which described various attributes that we were collecting. The BLM wanted to know various attributes about a culvert, depending on whether or not it was intersecting a stream or a road. In addition, they also wanted to know about headcuts and incisements that were being developed due to that concentrated flow. And this is just a quick list of all the different attributes we were collecting at every culvert. These are typical photos of our inventory, where we took photos above and below the culvert to give an idea of land cover. And then also, if there was incisements, we took additional photos. At the end of our inventory, we had inventoried well over 3,000 culverts, of which only 13% were considered functional and 50% were contributing to incised channels, which are considered major sources of sediment movement on our landscape. At this point, our partners have been oil and gas operators, grazing permittees, the Bureau of Land Management, and then various other project partners associated with the contractual designs. Our role for the Conservation District has really been resource expertise, assistance with implementation, hiring the folks to get on the ground and do the work. We have participated as an ID team member, and we are available for grant acquisition and management. Switching gears to wildlife habitat. So first we're going to hear from our BLM biologist, Mark Tonoff, who gives us a greater understanding of the definition of wildlife habitat and what species inhabit the area.
Okay, so we're located in the Wild Range front, where the high desert basically meets the mountains, and so this area is pretty high elevation. It ranges from 7,000 to almost 10,000 feet. It supports a variety of habitats, as you can imagine. The high desert sagebrush communities, all the way up to the aspen forested communities, and so. Part of what makes it's so unique is just the variety of species, plant and animal species that it can support, such as your big game species, moose, elk, mule deer, pronghorn antelope, all the way down to your sagebrush obligats, sage grouse. There are a number of leks in this area, as well as important winter range for some of the same species, mule deer, pronghorn. Things of that nature. So it supports a ton of different habitats. We have different shrub communities, mountain mahogany, all the way to, like I said before, sagebrush. So a variety of habitats allows for a lot of different species to utilize this area throughout the year, not just in the winter or in the summer, but the entirety of the year.
So while Mark provided a broad overview, a large emphasis of this area is its value for wildlife in the winter months. So next we are going to hear from Troy Fiesler with the Wyoming Game and Fish, where he goes into more detail about the projects that ensued to improve that wildlife habitat in the project area.
I say what makes this area important to wildlife is the critical habitat that it provides. That includes crucial winter ranges, migratory pathways, including those important stopover areas and transitional areas for those animals migrating, to the spring, summer, and fall habitats. That's important both to the animals that use this seasonally as well as year-long as well. And that spans for both big game and non-game species. I'd say most notably is the importance for this area for the wintering mule deer. It makes up one of the largest winter range complexes for the Wyoming Range Mule Deer Herd Unit. A significant portion of those deer that summer in the Grays River drainage, which is just over those mountains in the distance behind us, spend their winters in this area, and the conditions on the ground here and the quality of that habitat can ultimately reflect the number of individuals that return to that summer range based on winter survival here. So starting back in 2014, the Game and Fish Department, along with the BLM and other partners, implemented and began a landscape scale vegetation improvement project with the primary goal of increasing that quality and quantity of forage in this area for mule deer. Because for quite some time now, there have been growing concerns over population declines of mule deer. And while a specific reason cannot be pointed to, the quantity and quality of habitat has consistently risen to the top as one of the most important things to focus on. So because of that, over the years, projects have been implemented ranging from mechanical, chemical, and prescribed fire treatments, mainly in the shrub communities that you see here, and then as we gain elevation and into more of the aspen and mixed mountain shrub communities. Currently, we've used mulching treatments that we're standing in today. We have used aeration, Dixie harrow, selective tree harvests, herbicide application to treat invasive annual grasses, as well as prescribed fire, broadcast burning, and pile burning in communities that were identified as having a reduced vigor or lack of recruitment. And then combined with those treatments, we've had some post-treatment management follow-up in terms of livestock grazing rest, as well as noxious weed treatments following those projects. To date, over 23,000 acres in this area have been either treated mechanically or with prescribed fire. About 57,000 acres have been treated for cheatgrass. And then combined with that, getting at the livestock side of things, 17 additional livestock riders have been hired to help redistribute those animals on the landscape. And over 11 miles of either wildlife-friendly fencing or temporary electric fencing have been erected to help defer that grazing following treatments.
So as Troy mentioned, several hundred acres have been treated to date to improve wildlife habitat. The district has helped to provide electric fence materials and assistance with putting it up to facilitate livestock deferment on various treatments. In addition, we've acted as the banker, so to speak, where we contract those riders for projects, and then we can also pay contractors as needed for that project implementation. We've also arranged collaborator meetings to help to maintain communication between all partners. So rangeland health is not just important for wildlife habitat, but sufficient vegetation will reduce erosion and provide forage for livestock. That said, the BLM saw the need to ask, what is the current ecological state of the area? The range specialist at the time for the Bureau of Land Management had applied for funding through the state to complete an ecological site inventory on this landscape, which would help them better understand rangeland health and productivity. This map was one that we created using the most recent soil survey at the time, and then using the tool Soil Data Viewer from NRCS, we created this ecological site map. All those different colors out there indicate a different ecological site, and you can see that there are many in the area. Using the BLM technical reference for ecological site inventory, we developed a plan and procedures for consistency. And in 2018, we hired 3 technicians and 1 project lead to collect vegetation data on 120 points over the course of 2 years. The points were stratified based on the ecological site map that you just saw. We designed the project collaboratively with the BLM and NRCS while communicating with permittees. We followed current BLM guidelines for data collection, including the new assessment, inventory, and monitoring protocol. And in addition, we also clipped plants by species to calculate production and then similarity index. We dug holes and we correlated sites. Taylor dug all those holes, by the way. When we've compiled the data, there was multiple grazing allotments that were in our project area. We broke all of those sites out by allotment, and then we displayed the ecological site composition respectfully. And then we summarized the similarity index and its correlation and how many acres were within that particular allotment. This information is pertinent to range specialists for the BLM in understanding the rangeland health and productivity. What we learned at the end of this inventory was that 1/3 of the acres, the native plant communities, are in a desired state, and 2/3 of the acres or sites inventoried were in a less than desirable state. This data has helped us to better understand the integrity of the landscape and also helped us to understand where we should be focusing our efforts on the ground. The wildlife habitat treatment projects were a good start, but we also recognize that long-term livestock grazing management is absolutely necessary for sustainability. So the second project that our district was a part of relating to holistic rangeland health is the disturbance inventory. The BLM again obtained funding to better understand the ecological integrity specific to its reclaimed lands in the area. In 2020, the district hired 1 technician for project support, and then we completed the data collection on 35 sites. We were then responsible for compiling that data and writing the report. Just like the ecological site inventory, we designed the field procedures and the project collaboratively with the BLM, NRCS, and oil and gas companies, while also communicating again with the permittees. We completed a similar protocol, as I mentioned, and so that we could eventually develop relationships between the data sets of the ecological site inventory and the disturbance inventory if needed in the future. We're still compiling the data, and we'll have the final report by the end of this year. Just some photos. Like, we were consistent between the ecological site inventory and the disturbance inventory. Our roles specifically for the disturbance inventory and the ecological site inventory were that we were hiring and supervising our crews. We collaborated with everybody that was involved in that project, such as the BLM, NRCS, the oil and gas operators, so on. We managed the finances of those projects, compiled the data for the BLM, and then writing and distributing the final report to all interested folks. Switching gears to livestock grazing. Livestock grazing on this landscape dates back to the late 1800s to the early 1900s, when the homesteaders started moving out west on the likes of the Oregon Trail. As we learned earlier, settlement was encouraged throughout the West through various acts and provisions made by our very young U.S. government. Over the years, folks in this area have desired, BLM in particular, has desired to complete permit renewal to improve flexibility of the permit holders and to improve range condition. That said, during those processes, there have been many ideas on the how to improve range condition under livestock grazing. In 2009, our district was approached by the BLM to assist them with implementing various riparian health assessments and rangeland health assessments, which were intended to inform a subsequent EA and grazing authorization. Soon after, however, the EA was out for public comment. Permittees were not exactly happy with the draft EA, and neither were the likes of nonprofits that didn't want livestock necessarily grazing in that area. This EA quickly got remanded due to the contention. In 2016, a new range specialist for the area asked the district to assist them with developing a monitoring plan and working with the permittees. This up here is just a series of documents that have always allowed for livestock grazing in this area, and just over the years it's slowly, this is where we were going to start really implementing a lot of flexibility in management and some big changes on that allotment, but it just didn't happen for us. So like Sublette County is fortunate to have the commissioners that prioritize natural resources, the state of Wyoming is also fortunate to have a legislature that understands the importance of collaboration in rangeland health. Here we get the privilege of hearing from Justin Caudill about Rangeland Health Assessment Program, which has enabled our range program to engage in the request from the BLM.
The Rangeland Health Assessment Grant Program, also known as RHAP, was envisioned and brought forth in 2010 through the Wyoming State Legislature, provided to the Department of Ag to create a Rangeland Health Assessment Grant Program. We were seated with $100,000 to get some white papers from the University of Wyoming and $20,000 to write the rules and the steps for the Rangeland Health Assessment Grant Program. 2011 we received $100,000. We funded 3 projects out of that. Projects are funded at $20,000 per project, require a match of 30% for each project, and have the requirements of a collaborative partnership going forward to create a project. In other words, institutions of higher education, local government, and conservation districts can be a proponent for the program or a project. If it is a permitted allotment on Forest Service or BLM, the permittees have to be involved, the land managing agencies have to be involved, and also the Office of State Land Investment, which is the state's experts on range health assessment. All of those entities have to get together, agree to do a project, and that starts the base of a rangeland health assessment grant project. For this project specifically, the North Labarge Commons allotment, the Sublette County Conservation District has had 2 projects, phase 1 and phase 2. It's an example of taking a little bit of money, $40,000 for 2 projects, and making an economic investment into grazing at a sustainable level into the future for these allotments and across Wyoming. It's been a great endeavor, and it's a lot credit goes to the RHAP and the state legislature, but the biggest bang for the buck comes from the district staff and what they've done with this project.
We were funded for what we call phase 1, of which we did a boatload of inventory. Livestock grazing infrastructure such as water and fences were inventoried, so we knew what we had to work with on the ground. We also created a monitoring plan. There we go. Of which we create these site books that you see pictured here. These indicate site chosen, its background, correlation to ecological site, and the goals and objectives for that particular location. They also indicate what method, vegetation monitoring method was agreed upon to inform those goals and objectives, and then we set up a monitoring schedule. On an annual basis, a monitoring report is then created for all partners to help inform them of the conditions that year, utilization on the landscape, and to see where we are in terms of meeting our goals and objectives for the sites monitored that year. Because resource concerns had been identified on the landscape prior to our Rangeland Health Assessment Grant, we had set aside some of the funds to bring an outside opinion or resource expert. We asked Van Clothier with Stream Dynamics to come up and help us understand the landscape better and how we need to make changes to keep the water on the landscape. He then provided us this report, of which we've incorporated into our management plan. We then had a foundation built where we could start developing a grazing plan that was agreeable for all partners. We met several times where I gave out homework, and then we had group projects where we interacted at different meetings. These meetings were meant to be dynamic, helpful, and to encourage the group to identify resource concerns together and how to address them together. Everyone had the opportunity to participate. We started by identifying the values on the landscape, and then we created goals and objectives for each value. We kept coming back to this during every meeting, which helped us maintain our focus and our trajectory. We oftentimes had anywhere from 12 to 20 people engaged at our meetings. The meetings were progressive, and at each one, like I had mentioned, there was an education component, a group project, and homework to reflect on what was learned. Each group project and homework assignment actually informed the writing of our final grazing plan. The final result is our draft grazing plan, an implementation plan which focuses on a new rotation that will allow for rest or deferment on our landscape. However, the allotment is currently lacking reliable water sources to implement the grazing plan. The implementation plan then outlines the water sources that could be upgraded to facilitate this new livestock rotation. In addition, the group is currently applying for grants to help us write the NEPA in order to drill several new strategically placed wells to promote that flexibility for livestock grazing in the future. So it might have taken some poking and prodding, but we actually had 2 producers that were willing to reflect on the process.
Sublette County Conservation District has helped inform grazing management on the North Labarge Common by helping us come up with a monitoring plan, which is driving the grazing plan, which is driving additional resources that we're going to need to implement that plan. Our operations benefited from the district involvement by me personally. A lot of it is educational because I haven't been doing this my whole life, and when I started doing it, you know, to me, cows eat grass. If cows got grass, they got feed. Well, it turns out all grass is not created equal in the eyes of range scientists. So they've helped me a lot in learning about what we're doing, why we need to be doing it, and what it's going to look like in the future to make some changes or possibly, you know, whatever we need to do to make things better out there.
For us, SCCD has been very helpful in enabling us to justify hiring a consultant to us, and kind of shown us the benefits of having an advocate for our position and things, and that and the ability to finance the water system we put in, and hopefully several in the future.
How has your operation benefited from Sublette County Conservation District's involvement?
I would say that improving water development mostly. As living in a very arid area, water's an issue all over the range, and the more water, the better, and the better distribution. Plus, you can control cattle through the location of the water to a certain degree, and time will tell, but I think it's going to be a giant benefit over time.
So as far as the livestock grazing portion, there's been a plethora of folks that were at our meetings. People representing Office of State Lands. We brought in Extension to help facilitate some of our first meetings. Wyoming Game and Fish, NRCS, BLM, Forest Service, all the permittees, the Conservation District, the list could go on. We really assisted this project through housing that grant with resource expertise, and then also eventually taking on that role of facilitator. So that's the story about how we got from here to here. As a non-regulatory agency, what is the key to the district's involvement? The district has been very proactive for many years, and much of that is due to the intertwined land ownership of public and private lands throughout our county. We not only assist with private land management through conservation planning with our sister agency, NRCS, but we have also found that there are many benefits to being involved in the federal NEPA processes with the BLM and the forest. These do not only benefit the district and its mission, but it also has many direct benefits relating to our constituents, yourselves. What we have found over the years, and has really become apparent to me in my short time at the Conservation District, is that there are 2 things that can catapult our district's ability to be an effective participant in public land management. Relationships are number 1. These can either be pre-existing or as developed through projects or even perhaps community involvement or other interaction. As relationships are cultivated, it creates an atmosphere of trust and respect where all partner inputs are valued. Relationships built on positive interactions are very helpful in the collaborative process, and projects tend to make exponentially greater progress towards the solutions and the achievement of boots on the ground. But what if those relationships don't exist? For many of you, I would love to just say, go make friends with any agency staff, such as yourselves, as many of you are agency staff, and you would be invited to everything you're ever doing. But that's not the case either. The next thing that has really propelled our ability to be a part of that process is cooperating agency status. It really unlocks the door for our invitation into the NEPA process with our federal partners. Cooperating agency status provides us the ability to get our foot in the door, even if we don't know a soul in the room. Cooperating agency status is a benefit of being an entity of local government. The Code of Federal Regulations gives local agencies, such as conservation districts, the ability to be on the front lines of federal land use planning. Cooperating agency status gives us the ability to review documents and decisions before they go to public comment period for any projects that require NEPA. Districts can be involved at any level that we want, and the limiting factor is really just how much time can we commit to the planning of any one project or multiple. In addition, you as the public can also get involved. NEPA's environmental review process provides citizens an opportunity to become involved in the federal agency decision-making process. Active participation has several potential benefits. It increases your understanding of federal agencies' proposed actions. It increases your opportunity to provide thoughtful alternatives via comments to achieve the agency's goals and objectives. It reduces the unintended consequences of a proposed federal action and preserve appeal rights. If you do not have standing by participating, you cannot appeal in any venue. You must be involved to have legal standing. To obtain legal standing, you must provide comments early in the NEPA process and continue active involvement. Additional opportunities for development of proposed actions and/or alternatives can be employed by either the federal agency or suggested by participants. There are developed social processes that provide opportunity to reduce conflict in certain situations and increase awareness and add value to the NEPA process. You should consider becoming involved if the proposed federal actions affect you directly, if the proposed federal actions affect your livelihood directly, proposed action is or is not environmentally sound, or the proposed action is or is not practicable. The Council of Environmental Quality has prepared this guide that's up on the screen for the NEPA process with recommendations on how and when it may be of interest to you to get involved in the NEPA process. I would recommend talking to your local BLM, Forest Service, or other federal offices to learn more. So wrapping it up, we had many collaborators. I like this slide because it shows all these different people. We had not only the agencies, but there's like lists that go on of all of the actual like individuals that we worked with. And not only that, we had several project contractors that we were indirectly working with as well. With all of these partners come also access to a variety of funding sources, which is going to help us get those projects, all of the restoration projects, the livestock grazing projects, all of those things on the ground in the future. A few parting words from our partners.
This project spans thousands of acres, and not one person or even one organization can plan to successfully pull that off. So it takes a team of us to implement that, and the Conservation District has played a vital role in that process. And not only this project, but others throughout the county as well, through providing financial assistance through grant agreements and helping with contracting labor, through the purchasing of materials, hands-on help with vegetation monitoring, as well as just providing that local and expert opinion on the resources in the area.
Yeah, I would say, touch on what also what Troy said, you know, we've used Conservation District, you know, a lot of ways. They provide the riders a lot of times, sometimes the you know, just hiring riders and making sure the riders are following through with the contract, things like that they're out there on a daily basis and that things are going smoothly. We've tried to achieve rest through inventive ways like the use of riders, also electric fencing, things like that, and Conservation District has been vital in providing not only manpower but also some of the materials and things like that. So, you know, it really has been a great partnership and has helped us in ways that we probably couldn't have done it ourselves. So it's worked out well.
And I will touch on one other thing too that stands out, in particular on this piece of ground we're standing on now and this allotment that we're in. The Conservation District has taken a lead role in bringing together the permittees and all the land managers involved in this area on a routine basis. So we keep that open communication and continue to build those working relationships.
Has the range program met your expectations?
I think met, maybe I would say more than met. We started this kind of slow, thinking, you know, how can we in Sublette County maintain the viability of our agriculture community and at the same time not being accused of abusing the public lands, recognizing that if we take good care of the public lands, we're all better off. Agriculture, tourism, everybody benefits. Wildlife, it's a win-win for everybody. And by being lucky, I guess I would say, to have the right people at our conservation district, the right management that recognizes these values, we've really come a long ways. And I've got feedback from BLM people that say the same thing. They've told me as a commissioner how the federal agencies, how they have benefited. Their decision-making process has become easier by having an actively engaged conservation district.
In the face of turnover within both the BLM and the Conservation District, the district has continued to provide consistent rangeland monitoring data and build relationships among agencies and permittees. Unlike the BLM, the district is a non-regulatory entity, and they're able to work on a local level with both private and public landowners. Their goals and objectives promote relationships, and they allow for consistency as they relate to technical support and an understanding and a respect for the local customs and cultures and for differing agency mandates. The district is able to be flexible and seize opportunities that assist both the agencies and the community to maintain and/or work towards improving the health of our rangelands. In simpler terms, the Conservation District keeps the ball rolling and finds ways to keep everyone playing. The district is invaluable to all the players involved in finding a path forward and eventually finding a solution to some very compound problems in a complex landscape. The Conservation District assists me as a rangeland specialist in so many ways. On a technical level, I have the utmost respect for their scientific method, attention to detail, and the ability to collect and analyze data with diligence and consistency that I am not always able to prioritize in my position. On a permittee level, the district is able to have conversations that I am not able to in a regulatory capacity, and I cannot and nor should I have those conversations. As a result of those conversations, though, the district can work towards understanding and operating within some complicated private-public land interface constraints. And I am so grateful for the peer-based relationship I have had with the district as a natural resource professional over the years. I value their technical perspective, their passion for the landscape that we all manage, and I depend on them to bounce ideas off of and collaborate with to find solutions. We have different mandates, but at the end of the day, we are all after the same goal, and that is healthy landscapes that support a diversity of uses and also maintain a way of life that we are afforded in Sublette County. There is never a dull moment as we grapple with today's challenges, but I am confident that we are in this game together, and together we can make a difference.
I love it. Okay. While the road is long, it's honestly the relationships built along the way that matter the most when you're on the road to restoration. And even building this presentation was 100% collaborative. So I would be remiss if I didn't give credit to these ladies. Our neighboring Teton Conservation District provided filming equipment and expertise from Phoebe Coburn on the right, and Jessica Arts on my left ensured recording success and provided for the editing of all of our interviews. That's it.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Sherry. I think we can open it up for questions. So if you guys have any questions, we'd love to hear those or feedback. That was a lot. That was a lot of information. No feedback, Sherry says. That was a lot of information. So yeah, feel free to just ask away.
You guys are easy. This is good.
I have one, Jerry.
Go for it.
What did the group in Orlando think of your presentation?
I don't know. It was actually really fun to go down there and see like conservation just at so many different levels. And I think that's what's unique about districts is that we have a unique opportunity to really hone in on site-specific issues across the nation. There's over 3,000 conservation districts in the U.S. That said, I followed a presentation from Ohio, and Ohio had half of the room filled. And so I think, I'm not sure like if the lady sitting, because she never left, she was up there with me. Like, I'm not sure if she was just like, oh my gosh, why did I stay up here? Like I should have. But I think I did get some people come up afterwards. Like there was a girl from Elko, Nevada, Conservation District who's trying to figure out, she's currently just a temporary employee that they got other funding from to house her position. And she's been tasked with trying to figure out how in the world she's going to stay employed there. And so she's running after grants, and she's really into range. They've got a lot of range issues down there. So she was a lot of fun to talk to. Another gal from Bison, South Dakota, and they both were just, I don't know, what did I say, 45 minutes they were with me afterwards, just pulling things out of my head. So it was good. Yeah. Yep. So it's fun to see you all here.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Oh, question.
Yes.
When it comes to perennials and trees and stuff like that to help with the erosion, there's probably a plan in place. I maybe missed it in the presentation, but is that something that we're looking into, is like getting some trees planted in specific locations or anything like that? Bushes?
On that landscape, trees would not probably be a good choice because it's too arid.
Right.
So you wanna pick like what's growing there, right? We are using, and Janet can probably speak more to the actual like restoration projects that are going on, but we're using innovative ways such as like the beaver dam analogs and that's using willows to just kind of dam up and restore that hydrology into different creeks. What else is going on down there?
What we've got is we're doing what's called the Barge Watershed Restoration Project. We started in about the end of 2015 into, and it's been a continuous process. So SCCD did the inventory of culverts to establish a baseline. And from there we have a contractor who looks at, he did a rapid assessment, and we're taking a very holistic approach where we start at the headwaters, because it doesn't do any good to do a massive study, massive project down here if you don't correct the problems way up here. So we've got half of the projects that we're looking at, we've got about 20 that we're looking at right now, about 70 have been identified. So we have a huge pool to choose from. So we start up in the headwaters doing beaver dam analogs. We're down in the Birch Creek headwaters. We're looking at doing what's known as Z-dike rock structures, which are low-tech structures that you sort of mosaic the.
Tess?
I was just curious, I just walked in a couple minutes late. Is everyone in the room here a part of the Conservation District or the project? I was just curious who everyone was. I don't know everyone.
Yeah.
Do we want to introduce
do
ourselves? Because
introductions if
almost
that's
everybody in
helpful.
this room has touched this project in one way, shape, or form. Do you want to know
I
how?
was just, yeah. I was curious.
Perfect. Well, Taylor, let's start with you on this side.
I was the lead for the ecological site inventory crew, and now I'm a soil scientist for the NRCS.
I'm Alex Arts. I've been with BLM for 6 years now here in Glendale.
I'm Stan Kepley, Taylor's father. I'm just kind of neat, the idea, because you guys need to educate, because we're the stewards of this country, of Sublette County. You need to educate the public. And that's what you guys are doing right now.
He contributed to this project by giving us Taylor.
I'm Travis Cheney, I'm the supervisor at NRS and the BLM office.
I'm a mysterious, innocent bystander.
Oh, God, me too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not all agency people. No.
I'm Daryl Bennett. I used to be with the NRCS here in Sublette County. I was in DC for a few years and left in 2004. So I went to work for a private company. Native seed is my specialty, I guess. But anyway, I'm retired from that and we moved back to Sublette County. So I'm an interested party and kind of been involved a little bit with the Conservation District on projects and the NRCS.
I'm Christy Smith. I work with the Conservation District as a natural resource staff, and got to look at all the data that you guys collected, and working on the draft for the final report.
Yep, she's working on the disturbance inventory. So that, yep.
I'm Melissa Harrison, and I'm Sublette County resident, just interested.
I'm Kelsey Smith, and I work at the Pineville BLM as a natural resource specialist doing oil and gas stuff, reclamation, restoration, helping out with the disturbance inventory a little bit.
Megan Smith, I'm on the board of the Conservation District.
Amber Robbins, BLM, although I had a 9-year hiatus, so I worked in the Conservation District, but from BLM perspective back then, and then now I'm back with them, so.
Janet Ballas, I'm hydrologist at the.
I'm Dylan Gray, I'm the New Miller Soil Surveyor here in Pineville for NRCS. And I work with Taylor.
I'm Autumn, and I'm also a soil scientist at NRCS.
Do you,
Rebecca Waller, this is my next meeting with Waller, and I'm Zeppin. We're new Pineville residents, but we're gardeners and plant cultivators, so come just check out what's going on.
Think you more aeroponic food growers?
Spring Expo. Who are you, Tess?
Well, I just appreciate this. This is
Yeah.
very interesting. I admire Sherry. I think she's a super smart gal. That's why I came today.
Oh.
I am a planner for Sublette County, but my husband cowboys for a living. I spent a lot of time in Nevada, and so eat beef, it pays my bills is my, that's my motto, actually. So I'm just very passionate about rangeland ecology, the whole nine. It's nice to see a presentation like this for education purposes, and
Thanks.
so I came down to check it out.
Yeah. Yeah, I think even for us, I'm speaking for everybody in the room, but it's been, I mean, we've been working on this area for a really long time, and then all of these efforts, I think they've all been going on. And it's been hard to see the big picture of how they all come together. And so it was fun building this presentation because I had no idea how it was supposed to be. And I couldn't figure out how, because it's literally just a bunch of balls in the air. And so trying to put it in an orderly way so that you guys can understand it, but really, like, hopefully we all have like this big conceptual and like holistic understanding of management in that area, because it's probably the most difficult area to manage in our county. Geology and water.
I think the Conservation District, building those relationships with the producers,
Yeah.
that can be suspect of government agencies at times is so key and so important.
Yeah, yeah. It's fun. It's fun to all come together for the same gig. Yeah.
I'll talk to. I don't know